Okay. I'm just trying to do a live stream from my car on my phone. Um, Nothing planned. Waiting to pick the wife up from work, that's all. So, yeah, I just want to see how it run. But I figured I'd ramble on about the State of the Union a little more. Check out my video I just did on it if you're interested. But it's talking about some of the specific policies that came from it. So, you see the review from Stacey Abrams, which, again, I thought the review was pretty good. It seemed to me like it wasn't great. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, it was pre-recorded and it was going to say the same thing no matter what Trump said. Yeah, that's true. But the problem is it's so difficult to give these. They need someone like me that's able to watch something real fast and then give a review based on what they just see. No one ever does that. They pre-plan these rebuttals before the State of the Union's even planned. So for what it was, I didn't think it was too bad. And I definitely think Stacey Abrams, again, she's not someone whose policies I like. I'm just talking purely as a strategic or effectual politician to get votes. I think she's someone that could be a rising star in the Democratic Party. So we'll see how it goes. Now, it's the State of the Union particularly. The first thing I wanted to talk about was specific, his calms for, yeah, she is definitely out of touch with reality. I mean, that's definitely true. And again, like I said in my last video I did in this, I think that it's funny that the big knock on Trump in all of his speeches is always, oh, Trump's so dark. It's such a depressing view of the country and things like that. But if you look at Trump's speech was actually optimistic. Even the polls showed that even people that were Democrats said, yeah, they preferred this speech. They thought it was a pretty good speech. The Democrats have been saying ever since the 2016 conventions, I don't know where this narrative comes that the Democrats are all about hope and optimism and the Republicans are dark and miserable. From what I've been looking at, it's like both sides talk about the negative things they see in the country. So you'll have Trump say illegal immigration, for example, and the negatives that come from it and the crime that comes from it and things like that. Which, that's fine, that's what people do. But the Democrats have always been just like that. Like, you have all the talks of racist cops that were going in the Democratic convention, or all the talks of how we're all going to die from climate change, or corruption from, millionaires or billionaires and things like that. That's dark as well. But they allow, the media controls this narrative because the Democratic Party basically controls the mainstream media. The establishment mainstream media is just a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party majoritarily. And so they're allowed to spin this idea of it's like, oh, the Republicans are these dark, fear-mongering people and the Democrats are the party of optimism. But it's not true. It's not true at all. I don't know where they get this. So you could look at Abrams' speech and say, yes, there are specific people that possibly aren't doing well in this economy, which is totally true. I live in a poor area of the world. There's a lot of people, I think predominantly in the areas I'm seeing, actually you're starting to see jobs come back and wages rise. I think it's been good. But certainly there are people, you could be the greatest president of all time, the greatest politician of all time, have the greatest economic boom of all time. There's still going to be people that, their situation isn't necessarily increasing with everyone else. That's just the nature of reality. So I could see that she's maybe speaking to some of those individuals, but, it doesn't seem to be in reality with what all the economic numbers and things like that say. So I guess she had to do something. You have to spin it. I could have gave a better rebuttal to Trump's State of the Union. What I don't get is, this is what people don't understand strategically, and I think Trump did a very good job of this in his State of the Union. You want to be conciliatory to the other side whenever possible. So Trump's doing a good job when he's saying, oh, we worked to pass a, criminal justice reform bill with the Democrats. They helped with this, and we've worked with Democrats to put these other bills. It's one showing that, yeah, he's saying we need some kind of compromise, but the other thing that it's showing is that, especially the moment you see when he says, we have so many women that are in office. And again, if you saw my last video, I think it's funny that the media is taking this as it was somehow like a slap in the face of Trump. Oh, these women, Trump didn't realize most of those women are Democrats. Did you see how the women chided him? Boy, they got Trump with that. And it's like, no, Trump obviously knew that they were Democrats. Like, he's not a buffoon of that level. He knew. And he was saying he's being conciliatory. He's saying congratulations to the other side. Even, congratulations to women. And I know most of them are Democrats. I don't care. I still think that's an achievement. Now, there's a question to be had is it really an achievement? I don't know. I think it's great that we live in a country where being a woman no longer, in days long past, being a woman could have kept you from running for Congress. Now, if anything, it's a benefit. Like, we know that. And so I get this, like, this pat on the back kind of like, oh, women, we overcame as women. It's like, not really. I mean, I remember, did you ever watch the show House of Cards before, the whole Kevin Spacey things? Like, they talked about it on, sorry, I'm messing with the camera. I'm just holding it here. They talked about it on there, like, where they'll be like, oh, what about this person? We need, we're looking for a minority whip or whatever. Oh, how about this person? They check all the right boxes. They're black, they're a woman, they're LGBT. That stuff's a benefit to you. Now, there are less people in those groups in Congress right now, and I don't mind celebrating if some of those demographics come up. That's fine. But as an individual, if you check those boxes, you're not being hamstrung. No one's like, oh, you're a woman. I don't know. I'm not going to vote for you for Congress. There's no negative, and there's definitely positive to it. There are people that look at it like, oh, you're a woman. That's a benefit. And that's fine. People have the right to do what they want. I think that that's silly. But my point here is that Trump was conciliatory, and that's a good thing. You don't understand. People's react. I learned this when I did debate. Like, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. And in policy debate, people talk like auctioneers. Super fast. I couldn't keep up with most of them. I got sloppy handwriting. I'm not very fast when it came to stuff like that. And I'm not the type of person that was like more well-read than other people. And I didn't have like a great memory or anything like that. But one of the things I learned that gave me success was how your judges are always humans. And what do humans want to see? No one likes like a super braggart or someone that's just like, yeah, I'm always right and the other side's always wrong. But no one likes that. It's human nature when you hear someone saying, hey, and our opponents have good ideas too. There's a lot of good things coming from, even if it's not true, even if you're just paying lip service, that you have to understand, Trump's trying in this speech to reach people in the center. He's trying to reach independents, or if not independents, just people that are moderates that could be the Democrat, Republican Party, or people that aren't affiliated with the party. His base is basically his base, and there are people against him in the Democratic base that it doesn't matter what Trump does, he's always going to be the devil and they'll never vote for him. So you're reaching out to those people in the center. That's what it's going to take in 2020, for example. Adjusting here. That's what it'll take in 2020. You need to get those people in the center. And those people like to hear these kind of conciliatory, like, oh, Trump's not such a bad guy. He's saying thank you to the other side. One of the best examples of Trump doing this better than his opponents were, do you remember during the third debate that he had with Hillary Clinton? And the moderator asks, can you say something good about your opponent? And Trump legit, like, it seemed heartfelt. Trump said, I think Hillary's a hard worker. Like, she's someone who will continue to fight, and she's been doing this a long time, and she definitely works hard at it. Now, you might say, well, yeah, is that true? But it doesn't matter. Trump, it seemed legitimate, and it is true. I do think that about Hillary Clinton. I think she was corrupt. I think her ideas were terrible, but certainly she worked hard at them. That's a legitimate compliment. And so then when they asked Hillary, like, what do you have nice to say about Trump? She's like, his family's okay. Like, that's crap. If you're independent and you're like on the fence between those two, you're like, wow, Trump's answer actually seemed legit. Like, he actually gave an honest compliment. Hillary was basically saying, I have nothing good to say about Trump. His kids seem okay. That's not a good look. And I think that Trump did a very good job in this State of the Union talking about, yeah, I absolutely think he meant it. I think he did a very good job at the parts where he was like, we need to work together. We need to have unity. We have worked and we have compromised. And, congratulations to women. And especially then when he's talking about how his economy's been good for women, it's been good for minorities. And that type of stuff, I think, is effective. That's one of the reasons I think you're seeing that the poll numbers from the speech were so good. Stacey Abrams' rebuttal, on the other hand, it wasn't like that. It's the best part of her speech was when she said, which every American should say, is, I'm not cheering for Trump to do poorly. I forget the exact wording she said. I'm not cheering for him to fail. That's great. That's exactly what she should be saying. This is what I said going into the 2016 and the 2018 elections. I don't like the Democratic Party. In fact, particularly for me, it was the Kavanaugh deal. After basically the mainstream Democratic leadership saying innocent until proven guilty no longer exists. We have to believe people based on their genitalia. Like, yeah, that's it for me. That's anathema to everything this country stands for: personal responsibility, individual liberty. The idea of British common law and due process. Like, for me, I couldn't vote for a Democrat after that. Maybe at the local level if it was someone I knew or something, but not at the national or state levels. So that's, but having said that, I said in 2016 and 2018, let's say Hillary would have won in 2016. I really dislike Hillary. I think she was corrupt. I think her ideas were bad. And I think that she's basically part of this like aristocracy dynasty, like the Clintons, the Bushes. It's like, yeah, we don't need that in this country. However, had she won, I'm cheering for her to prove me wrong. I hope the economy takes off. I hope we end a lot of these disastrous foreign wars. I want peace. I want everyone, even people that ideologically hate me, I want them to be successful. I want their lives to be happy. I want, disease to go down. I want it to be a situation where, even though I'm moderate on abortion, I'm definitely more pro-life than pro-choice, but I hope we have a system where the economy's so good and women feel so great about themselves that they don't have the need, to have abortions. But I want Hillary to do well. I want the Democrats to do well. Whoever's leading the country, I want them to do well. Now, I'm skeptical. I doubt they will do well, and I'll certainly point out when I think they're doing poorly. But you still want the leader of your country to do well. I didn't like Obama, but I cheered for him to do good for the country, right? And so you like to at least hear Abrams say that. But the rest of it was just basically Trump and the Republicans are terrible people. Everything they say is terrible. And again, that does the fact that it was pre-canned and it didn't address anything specifically Trump said, I didn't think it was that effective. But having said that, it was better than, you remember Marco Rubio with the dry mouth, and the one rebuttal he gave to Obama's. And then who was it last year? Kennedy, right? It's like one of the Kennedy kids, speaking of, aristocracy and dynasties and the politics of the United States. His speech was terrible last year. So Abrams did better than that. And given that it's such a hard speech to give, I'm not going to throw Abrams under the bus. I didn't think it was a particularly good speech, but I thought it was good for what it is, both on the Republican and Democrat side. When the Republicans were giving responses to Obama's State of the Union, I never thought they were that good. So, take it for what it is. I'm not celebrating Abrams too much, but I do think that maybe she has a role in the future of the Democratic Party. I wouldn't be surprised to see her do well. Now, as I said in my last video, for me, the biggest takeaway from the State of the Union was what the Democrats were applauding for and what they weren't applauding. And the reason is, as I explained in that video, is I understand the idea of you don't really want to applaud for the accomplishments of your opponent. I get that, right? So if the Democrats had just sat on their hands the whole time, except obviously everyone will always cheer for oh, here's a cancer survivor, here's a Holocaust survivor, those type of people, here's someone who fought in World War II. Of course, both sides will applaud them. But had it just been when Trump's talking about his policies, even something that the Democrats seemingly are really for, such as criminal justice reform, I get if they don't want to applaud because it's well, we don't want to applaud our opponent. It's childish, it's stupid, but the whole pomp and circumstance is childish and stupid anyways. So had they just sat there and not applauded any of that type of stuff, I swear to you, my video today about the State of the Union would have been yeah, a lot of people were saying the Democrats wouldn't applaud anything. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But when they choose to applaud some things and not others, then it really makes you wonder, well, wait a minute. Clearly, they're willing to applaud if they agree with something. And I'm not talking about just the cancer survivor. Again, that's separate. Everyone, regardless of how bad our politics are, we're not at the point yet where you're not going to cheer cancer survivor or Holocaust survivor, So I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the policy. So the thing that the Democrats went nuts over the most was the idea of them winning political power, women winning political power. And to me, it comes off as selfish. They're like, woo, high five. We did it. Yeah, we're such great people. We did it. And they're I think the USA champ, I don't know if they joined in on it. I think they eventually did. But I think that what you're starting to see, and I learned this during the conventions in 2016, particularly on the Democrat side, there were a lot of Bernie people that were at that convention, if you remember, that were furious because Bernie got screwed over by the Democratic Party. So they'd start chanting stuff, and the Democrats were basically instructed to start chanting USA if there was a chant they didn't like. I think that maybe that's was going on. I don't know exactly what the Democrats were chanting, but it seemed like then it was overwhelmed by a chant of USA, and then the Democrats joined in. But it certainly was a chiding atmosphere where they were kind of yeah, Trump, woo, we did it, we got you. And it's no, Trump's being the bigger person. He's saying, that's great. I'm great to see women participating in the process. And so the fact that they were so celebratory, which I don't even mind that they were so celebratory about themselves, it's that juxtaposed to what they didn't even applaud for that I find very interesting. And so the best example, and people have started to notice this, is look at Ocasio-Cortez when they're talking about ICE arresting sex criminals. Now, this should be an issue that, one, everyone, regardless of your party or political ideology, everyone should be for this. The idea of sex trafficking, human trafficking is disgusting. They are some of the worst criminals in the world. They deserve to have the harshest punishment legally allowed against them. And I don't care if what administration is responsible for locking some of these people up. I don't care if it's Nancy Pelosi had a task force that she's in charge of and they locked people up. Good. Great for that task force. Great for her for getting those scumbags locked up. Fantastic. Yet here we say Cortez sitting there stone-faced, not applauding. And other Democrats. Because it was ICE that did it. And they want to disband ICE or they want to criticize ICE. That's truly appalling. What it really goes to show you what a lot of people have accused that to a lot of these people, it's actually, and you saw this with the wall, I felt, it's more advantageous to just hate Trump than to actually be concerned with the constituents you say you're concerned with. So when we look at, for example, the wall, it wasn't that the Democrats were saying, I mean, they did say this in part. They said, the wall won't work and it costs too much. That was part of the argument, but they can't really win that argument because I think Trump did a good job yesterday. One, the cost, we know it's a pittance compared to what's spent. And the Democrats know if you're going to play that game, then we should go line by line, which we should anyways. And if I get elected to Congress, this is one of the things I'd push for. Let's go line by line through this budget and see other things that cost. What kind of studies on turtles are we doing that cost millions of dollars? But let's add up all that stuff and start getting rid of a lot of this garbage that's not that helpful. Could be interesting, could be okay, but that doesn't mean the taxpayers should be paying for it, So I think that what the Democrats then said was they're not really, it's not a really big winner to say, oh, the wall would cost too much. And it's not a really big winner to say the walls won't work because the people on the border think that it'll work. Like Trump said last night, we see in places like El Paso and San Diego it worked. We see in places like on Israel's southern border it worked. Now you might say, and it's a reasonable argument to say, yeah, but there's certainly some areas that we don't need a wall or a wall would be unfeasible. That could be true. So Trump's original boisterous claim of, a wall from ocean to ocean, maybe not the best idea, but it's clear that Trump's revamped that. And it's clear that the money he's asking for now and to get the government opened isn't that whole ocean to ocean. It's just a small pittance to put the wall in the most important places. So this is a wordy way of saying the Democrats then, Nancy Pelosi, particularly the strongest Democrat, the most powerful one, she comes out and says, walls are immoral. And it's a lie. It's hypocritical. Not only because Trump, as he rightfully puts out, a lot of these politicians live behind walls, but because Pelosi and the Democrats have, in the past, pushed for the very same type of wall, the steel slats, that Trump's pushing for now. So the fact that she says it's immoral, does that mean she was immoral when she voted for that border in the past? Does that mean that they will then be saying we need to designate money to rip up the walls in San Diego and El Paso and other places? If they're immoral, if they're against what our country is, right? And so it was clear this is a lie. And what that said was this, and you've maybe heard me say this in other videos. When it comes to the government shutdown, I'm a Trump supporter, right? I clearly have my bias. But every one of us, regardless if you hate Trump or love Trump, you have to admit, for the government to shut down, there's at least some blame to go on both sides. Now, you might say which side's more to blame than the other. I blame the Democrats way more than Trump. But clearly, both sides have some blame because either side could wake up the next day and say, you know what, I'll give in to everything my opponent says. And then the shutdown would end. So it takes two for there to be a shutdown. It takes two sides. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't and shouldn't articulate who's more to blame. But the idea, and you saw this in Abrams' response, where it's like, you shouldn't use people as political tools. The furloughed workers shouldn't be political pawns. Okay, well then that would be true of both sides. If one side's using them as pawns, then the other side is to some degree. Now, you might say, yeah, but one side's more responsible than the other. That's fine. But don't get in this moral high horse. It's not as morally simple as the Democrats and their media allies are trying to make it seem, where it's just like, Trump doesn't care about the furloughed workers and the Democrats do. No, they don't, because if they did, then they would end the shutdown for a mere $5 billion that Trump's asking for. It is clear that the Democrats care more about not giving $5 billion to the wall than they did about furloughed workers. You could also say it's clear Trump cared more about border security and having this wall than he did about the furloughed workers. Now, on both those, I don't mean they don't care about the workers. I mean they don't care about the fact they were furloughed, right? That's the idea. Now, my articulation of the problem is this. When you look at Trump, he at least, I think we could all say, legitimately thinks that a wall would work, or at least, well, I guess some people would say no, he's just grandstanding. But to me, I think he legitimately cares about border security. So it would be fair to say his concern about border security was his reason for allowing the government shutdown. What was the Democrats' concern that they allowed the shutdown? That the wall cost too much? That it wouldn't work? No, it was that the wall was immoral. That was their claim. That's why they couldn't vote for it. And we know that's a lie, because they voted for a similar wall in the past, right? So in other words, they revealed the truth. The truth is, they hate Trump. They don't want Trump to have a win. And so they were willing to have the shutdown to keep Trump from getting a win. Trump was willing to have a shutdown because he cared about border security. Even if you approach it in the most cynical way for Trump, Trump was willing to have a shutdown because he wanted a win. Let's say that's how you approach it, which I think he does legitimately care about border security. But nonetheless, even in that world, you have to say the blame's 50-50 then. The way I look at it, I think at least Trump cared about an actual issue. And you could say the same thing about Obamacare, right? And the shutdown under Obamacare. Now, I think the Republicans, their reason for having the shutdown was, we feel this is a gross overexpenditure. It's wrong for the government to get involved, and it will increase healthcare prices. The Democrats aren't making that argument about the wall. They're not saying it will increase illegal immigration or anything like that. They're just saying it's immoral, which is ridiculous. But Obama, say what you will about the shutdown under him, and I despised Obamacare. I still think it's terrible legislation. He believed in it. Like, he was willing to have a shutdown because he thought that was important legislation. He was wrong. I think it was bad legislation, but it wasn't like he was just like, I'm shutting the government down just to spite the Republicans. But that's what the Democrats are doing now. And I think that's a terrible thing. We see this, like I said, at the State of the Union, with people, they won't applaud unemployment numbers being at record lows for African Americans. No applause there. They won't applaud ICE arresting sex traffickers. They won't applaud girls, 300 women being saved from sex traffickers. They sit on their hands in all of this. Now, it could be, right, that they're just like, well, I just don't want to applaud for things for Trump, and anything that has to do with immigration or Trump's economy, I wasn't going to applaud. Okay, that's fine, but then you shouldn't stand up there high-fiving and congratulating yourself when he mentions that you, as a Democratic woman, won a lot of seats in Congress. It just looks selfish and self-centered. So you're more concerned that you won a seat in Congress than you are that women were saved from sex traffickers. Like, it seems like nonsense. And as I said in my last video, this gets to a broader point that you often see with this kind of identity politics pushing narrative. Whereas they take issues, a lot of times when they're criticizing certain groups as oppressor and oppressed, what they do is they look at the upper echelon of that group and then use that to make all of their judgment. So, for example, men are oppressors, and you'll ask, well, why? What's going on? And as if you've heard me say before, one, identity politics is stupid, it's dangerous, and it's terrible. It's going to lead to a lot of division in this country, right? But if you are looking at it, the truth is that every group, and I mean every group, you could take it down the line, right? You could look at it at race, gender, age, ability, religion. There is no group that you could isolate from that, because what they want to do is say one group's oppressor, let's take race. White people oppressor, other races oppressed. There is not one group you could take that isn't both oppressors and oppressed, both historically and currently. So, for example, there are situations where if you're just looking at it holistically in numbers, white people have an advantage over black people. I firmly believe there's probably a lot of times where if you're involved in police interactions, it's beneficial to be white than black. Not always, but in a lot. Now, is that because the police are racist? No, I don't think so. I think because of cultural and economic issues, you see disproportionately violent crimes being committed by black, particularly males, which means that the police are then in a more antagonistic situation. They're more concerned with their safety, which leads to a more chance to have an interaction with people that happen to be of that demographic. That doesn't mean black men are born inferior or anything like that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying a lot of these communities they are in, for whatever reason, whether it be economic or cultural, are at high crime areas, which means that then in those areas, if you happen to look like one of the people that are committing a lot of these crimes, the police are more likely to interact with you. We could argue till we're blue in the face whether or not that's a good thing. But that's an issue I'd be willing to say, okay, that would be disadvantageous if you're a black male, right, in an interaction with police. But let's say you're applying for a university. Well, we can see with the Harvard lawsuit that's going on that actually then being a black male or being black in general, your scores could be considerably lower. You basically get a benefit. Now, does that mean, screw black people, they're privileged and white people are victims? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I do think we should do away with that kind of affirmative action mentality, but I'm against the government having any policies that favor or disfavor of race or gender, etc., in one way or the other. But also what I'm saying is it's more nuanced than you'd believe. That, it's white people are oppressors and black people are oppressed. No, it's not like that. Each situation's different. And ultimately, like I've heard people say this is the honest truth. When you take identity politics out to the furthest extent, because we keep breaking the groups up, right? You have this incentive to be a victim. And so you're LGBT, you're gay. I'm a victim. But then the next person's like, yeah, but I'm trans. That's more of a victim than just being gay. But then the next person's like, yeah, but I'm like pansexual. I'm not even trans. I don't even have sexuality. And then the next person's like, yeah, but I'm trans species. I'm not even, I'm part animal spirit. And then the next person's like, yeah, but I don't even, and it just keeps going out and out and out, like to the an infinite. And ultimately what you do is, when you start to look at, there's so many groups you could be a part of, right? Each of us, I'm white, I'm a male, I'm straight, those are all oppressive. But I came from a poor family, so now I'm oppressed there, and, etc. You take all these categories, and there's an infinite number of categories you could have. And what happens at the end is, your picture, your stamp of all these categories is basically, because there's an infinite number, going to be unique. Thus, the ultimate oppressed group is the individual, which is exactly why identity politics is dumb in the first place. But now, that was a little rant about that. What ends up happening is you see a lot of people that want to play this identity politics game is they look at the top. So when you ask them, well, what's the deal? Like, when you talk about white men, what's the problem? And they'll be like, well, look at CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. They're all majoritarily white men. Okay, that's fine. But the problem is when you say that then, and then you're lumping in, regular white guys that will never have a chance to be a CEO. The guy that's trimming your tree, the guy that's a truck driver, the guy that's a farmer, the guy that's working in the sewer. He supposedly has privilege because 400 guys are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies? I mean, it just seems ridiculous. It seems like that guy working in the sewer has much more in common with a woman who has a similar job than he does with a man that's a Fortune 500 CEO. Just because he has the same genitalia, that means he's more lumped in with that person than a woman that's working a very similar job to him? That doesn't seem to make any sense whatsoever. But that's what they do. They look at the upper echelons and say, aha, see, whites are oppressors because if you look at politicians or CEOs, they're all white. Okay, but the average white person, that's only a very small percentage of white people. What about the rest? They get tarred as they have this privilege? No, it's ridiculous. It's just as an argument why identity politics is stupid. Now, the reason I bring this up is it's very similar to what I see what's happening with these women applauding at the State of the Union. And the idea is this. They're like, yay, we did it. Women in politics. Woo, we made it. That shows, that's the important thing. That's more important than, women, how they're doing in the economy, or minorities, how they're doing in the economy and all that. At least the way they celebrated it seemed more important. And the question is, okay, it's good for those women, but what's that for the average woman? Was it that the average woman's necessarily screwed over unless they have women that are politicians? Well, no. Unless you could prove that the men that were politicians weren't advocating for women. I don't think that's the case. So in other words, yes, it's good for the couple women that are now in an economically superior position, in a position of power as individuals. But what does that do for women on the whole? I don't know, but yet we look at that and what they celebrate, that's the most important thing. Yes, that Elizabeth Warren has a position, that Ocasio-Cortez has a position, that Tlaib or whatever her name has a position. Why is that the most important thing to celebrate? Even if you think that's important for women on whole, the fact that you go nuts over that and act like that's the biggest deal. No. How are things for the average woman? How are things for the average minority? How are things for the average man? That's far more important than we did it as us specific people. We're in the, the political class now. I just don't get it. It seemed very selfish to me. And I think it's important to point out because you're seeing a lot of mainstream outlets, they got the narrative, they got the talking points. Oh, this was them sticking it to Trump. What are you talking about? It was Trump being conciliatory. So, yeah, I thought that was the most important part of the speech. Probably the second most important part of the speech is the idea that Trump firmly said we're not going to be a socialist country, and that's spot on. Now, I have a friend who I was just talking to yesterday who's a socialist, and it's tough because I did a big 4-hour live stream on socialism. It's a bad idea. Socialism is really bad, but that doesn't mean that I'm against any kind of social safety net program. Now, I lean to being against it because I think that we grossly overspend, and as soon as we start having the government get involved in things, they're inept, they're bureaucratic, and it ends up not being solved, as well as I think that things could be in the private sector. Nonetheless, I don't think you're immoral or a terrible person if you say we want more social welfare programs, nor do I think that's full-blown socialism. But full-blown socialism is terrible, and it will always fail, as it always has failed. And it seems to me that 10 years ago, you would have laughed in the face. You remember, like, when Romney said, oh, Russia's our biggest geopolitical threat, and Obama and everyone, and then, like, just 3 years later, they were like, oh, yeah, Russia, everything's Russia. There's Russians hiding under every bed, right? Well, it's like that with socialism, right? And this is one of the things I say all the time. I respect someone who just comes out and is totally honest with me, even if they have a position that I think's terrible, than someone who's mealy-mouthed. That's like, oh, no, just this little step and then no further. And so we saw this from a lot of people in the Democratic Party for years. Like, people were like, whoa, is this getting towards more of a socialist? Oh, no, this isn't socialism. And then, okay, well, it's democratic socialism. It's different. And now we're just full on seeing, yeah, socialism. What's wrong with that? And this is what was warned. This is, you give an inch and it ends up taking them out. Whereas if the people were just honest in the first place and said this is socialism, then let the people vote. Do they want socialism? My fear is the next recession we see, which eventually there will be a recession, that we're going to see a stronger push for socialism. And then that'll lead to a really big recession. Things will get really bad. But anyways, why was Bernie so pinch-faced when Trump said we won't be a socialist country? I thought Bernie wasn't a socialist. He's a democratic socialist, right? That's different. Why was Cortez? Why were so many people upset? Why were there boos and stuff when he said that? I thought they weren't socialists. They're democratic socialists, right? They should say, yes, we agree. We'll never be a socialist country. We're democratic socialists. That's different than socialism. But they didn't do that, did they? They murmured and booed and pinch-faced. I wonder why that is. Because they are advocating socialism. They know they are. They just know it's not popular, so they have to lie to you. You remember one of the architects of Obamacare? I forget his name, but he came out and he said, yeah, we basically had to lie to the people to pass Obamacare because we knew it was for the best for them, but we knew if we were upfront and totally honest, it wouldn't have had the popular support we needed. That's how a lot of people, and there are people on the right that feel this way as well. That's wrong, right? You have to trust the voter, no matter how dumb they may be. Trust me, the voters are dumb. I'm dumb. We're all dumb, right? And voters as a group are not the smartest, right? But neither are the politicians. Neither are any group. We're all dumb. So just be honest and let people vote based on that honesty. And so why the boos? Why the boos for saying we won't be a socialist country? 10 years ago, it would have been laughed at. Why is the president even saying? If Bush would have said that in like 2003, we'll never be a socialist country, people would have been like, oh, yeah, sure, I guess, but who says we're close? But now it's a real threat. Now it's a real thing. And we know it. Coincidentally, another good part in Trump's speech was when he attacked the abortion. He was absolutely right. Again, I'm not someone who's totally like a life begins at conception. I am for early trimester abortions. But these laws that are being passed, and it's not just that they're being passed, but they're being celebrated. And, you know, I did my live stream last week was all about abortion. And you could look for yourself as to why, based on how they defined women's health, that the law that didn't pass in Virginia and the one that did pass in New York basically makes it so any woman that their pregnancy is affecting their health, which could be qualified as physical health, mental health, emotional health, familial health, which, what the heck does that mean? Will put strain on the family? Well, yeah, that's the definition of having a baby, right? Any woman who's ever been pregnant, their family structure's changed. It's put stress on the family. So of course it affects familial health. Well, that's reason for an abortion in the third trimester if they want one now. The same with emotional health. Do you know one woman ever that's been pregnant that it hasn't affected their emotional health? Of course not. That's why we have postpartum depression, because everyone realizes it affects your mental and emotional health when you're pregnant. And then some women, even after they have the baby, still are affected by that. We recognize that. That's an illness that we recognize. So this literally meant, these laws literally meant, any woman's now eligible for a third trimester abortion. Now, let's say you begrudgingly came to that decision because it's like, man, it's so difficult. You know, I'm not cheering for abortions, but I feel women should have these rights. I disagree with you, but it's not something to celebrate. It's not something to light the city pink up over. That's crazy. So Trump rightfully calls this out. That was another great part in this speech. And it's not just right morally and because it's an issue I like, but I also try to look at it as strategically. And sorry, Democrats, this is why they don't want to talk about it. This is why my buddy Drone Tech, who I did his show yesterday, he has like at least 2 videos from this week up of how like CNN and other news stations, like anytime when they're talking about Governor Northam, who maybe did this blackface or KKK outfit, and you'll have Republicans like, or Republican sympathizing people that are like, yeah, and let's not forget his comments about infanticide or something. They just want to be like, ah! They don't want to talk about it because they know it's a loser. They know that the average American is kind of in the middle on abortion. They are pro-life and pro-choice, or maybe anti-life and anti-choice if you want to be cynical, right? But most people, I think, feel that abortion's not a good thing, but women should have some right to choose in early trimesters. But once you start to get to later trimesters, no. Unless there's a severe emergency, there shouldn't be a reason for an abortion then. I think that's how most people think. Now, you have people on both sides. You have the extremes that are just like abortions at whim, even during labor, and you have the people that are life begins at conception, almost no abortion ever. But I think that most people are in between there. And so when the Democrats overplay their hand, not just by passing these bills and pushing for them in other places, not just by then coming out and articulating how in certain circumstances this means we could abort a baby after birth, which it's like, oh my God. But then, to celebrate, to light the city up, woo, shout your abortion, that type of stuff. No, that's unpalatable to the average American. And I think people watching the State of the Union, there's a lot of people that maybe aren't looking into day-to-day politics, or they're only getting the mainstream point of view. Excuse me. This was Trump's chance to kind of speak directly to the American people, and I think that a lot of them would agree, like, what? Yeah, this kind of abortion stuff's crazy. It's just crazy. So I think that was a good point. But the reason I'm talking about the idea of, I wish people would just be honest, because, you know, I personally met people. I talked to my last live stream about a debate I had that I lost, where, you know, my opponent was honestly, truly believes that as long as that umbilical cord's attached for any reason, a woman could abort the baby. Even if if the baby's out of the woman and just attached by the umbilical cord, still abort. Like, she truly believes it. It's disgusting. It's horrific. That's a horrific, but at least she's honest. Because there's so many people that are like, oh, no, it's just about this particular situation. And then they're trying to, you know, it constantly goes. Gun control is another good issue, you know. I often talk to people and they're like, you know, why are you like, you know, the bump stocks, for example. I'm never going to have a bump stock. I could be honest that there's probably no practical purpose for having a gun stock other than, you know, entertainment value, or, you know, just because it's neat to shoot targets with or something. Now, do I think that removing them is going to even save one life? No. It's easy to make your own bump stock and stuff. But it's like, why would you defend legislation against that? Because people know that as soon as you give that inch, then it goes to the next step. So you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. I'll give you an example. You hear all these talks about gun control where they'll talk about things like, you know, we just need to ban assault weapons. Okay, define assault weapon. When do you think it's automatic? Yep, that's basically already banned. You have to have, like, special permits to get fully automatic weapons. Well, you know, like the ARs. So you mean semi-automatic? Yes, we need to ban all semi-automatics. Okay, that's basically every handgun. So you're saying banned handguns? Oh, no. It's just these particular guns we need to ban because they result in so much death. That's why we need to get rid of them. And then you'll be like, well, actually, the vast majority of attacks and deaths I'm going to have to go here in a second. The vast majority are caused by handguns. So what you're really saying is all of your interpretation is reasons to get rid of handguns as well, right? No. But you know darn well that's exactly. I'm going to head out for now. I'll be doing more stuff later tonight. Maybe not live, but videos. But thanks for everyone checking this out. I was just trying while I was waiting to pick my wife up from work to do a live stream in the car. So I hope you guys like this. Please like and subscribe, and I'll be